Welcome to the Black History Month panel. This year, with the focus on our local community here in Vancouver and across Canada, we are so thankful for the panelists who all made time to come down here and share their stories, experiences with the Kitsilano community. Kids, students, and teachers, we hope that you take time to respect and listen to the panelists and learn something from this unique experience. A gentle reminder to be respectful and turn your phones off for the duration of this event.
With deep gratitude and respect, we are honored to be learning and unlearning on the ancestral and unceded lands of the Musqueam, Squamish-Ocotillo, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
My name is Adriana. I use she, her pronouns, and my background is Trinidadian Canadian.
My name is Lily. I use she, her pronouns, and my background is Barbadian Canadian.
Please give a warm welcome to this year's panelists.
Thank you so much for being here. Could you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about the work you do?
Hi everyone, my name is Shayla Bird. My pronouns are she, her. I identify as Black, more specifically identify as African American because I was born in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm mixed with Irish heritage as well too. Overall, I would call myself a creative, whether it's creating resources, whether it's designing and creating spaces for people to come together and collaborate or share ideas, or also strengthening relationships with partners around North America. So ultimately just creative. I do have public historian there, which just means that I work in non-traditional settings. I take history and I make it digestible for people like you to ingest.
Hi everyone, I'm Rashida McLean. I identify as African Canadian, specifically Ghanaian Nigerian. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am director of legal, so I'm a lawyer for a mining company. We search for, dig, and sell metals such as copper, gold, and zinc and nickel.
Hi, I'm Jamila Pomeroy. I am Kenyan Canadian. I'm biracial. My mom's side, my mom's from Newfoundland, St. John's, Newfoundland, and my dad is from Kenya, and we are Oromo and Wa'amu from Lamu Island, Kenya. And I'm a writer, director, and producer. What else can I say? I made the film Union Street, which some of you have watched, and I use she, her pronouns.
Thank you all so much. Next question, where have y'all lived and how have you viewed your experience as a Black person now living in Vancouver?
I grew up in Toronto following my move from Ghana to Canada. That's where my family first resided. So I spent my elementary school years in Toronto and my high school years in Toronto. I left Toronto when I decided to go to law school in Victoria, and that was the first that I experienced sort of a different population. In Toronto, it was very diverse. We had individuals, like my high school had individuals from all parts of the world. And so when I first moved to Victoria, I noticed a bit of a difference. It was a quite obvious difference, and sort of feeling as though there were very few Black people when I first moved out there.
I was born in Toronto. I grew up in the suburbs in New Westminster, and yeah, similar experience. Just growing up in New Westminster in the Queens Park neighborhood. Our family was the only Black family in the neighborhood, and I didn't actually go to school with another person of color until I was in middle school. So definitely very, very, a different experience than say like in a place like Toronto for sure.
Thanks. So as I mentioned, I was born in Atlanta, but I was adopted and I was raised in the Fraser Valley. And so I moved to Vancouver about 1.5 years ago. I moved for just better employment opportunities to get closer to a bigger city. And I would say that experience has been really positive. I've been able to engage with, different organizations that I probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to work with if I lived in a smaller city. But ultimately, it's interesting living in Vancouver. It's a very expensive city, so I feel like as a young person, I'm navigating that. I'm navigating, sometimes with it being more expensive and having job insecurity, I would say that's something, that I'm also experiencing as well too, but there are,
Stop there. That's really great. Great. Thank you. In your travels around Canada, is there something you've seen or witnessed that you would like to bring to Vancouver? Like, is there a dream that you have for the future of Vancouver?
So yes, there is. When I was reflecting on this question, I was thinking about Africville in Nova Scotia. So show of hands if you've heard of Africville. Okay, awesome. So Africville was a prominent community in Nova Scotia that started to be inhabited really in like the 1800s, so it was very old. The city of Nova Scotia recognized that the Black people were inhabiting a really expensive piece of land. And so the term that I want to introduce to you is urban renewal. And really what we can see when we look at a lot of Black communities in so-called Canada is that the cities have used urban renewal policies to ultimately destruct these neighborhoods and break them up and then take the land, build and offer, economic opportunities and housing for people who aren't Black. And so in 2010, a group of folks in Africville worked together to get the land back. And so in 2010, they accumulated 2.5 acres of land and $3 million to create a museum. And I would really like to see the same, I don't exactly know the word, not reciprocity, but just recognition from the city of Vancouver. I study Black migration patterns in BC, and I'm really interested in Hogan's Alley. I specifically moved from Abbotsford to Hogan's Alley, or what we call today Strathcona, to be closer to the research that I was doing. And so I also had the opportunity to work as a liaison between the City of Vancouver, Black Planning Project, and Hogan's Alley Society to talk about what the future of this neighborhood is going to look like. And what I want to see the city do is approach this with agency. Agency is, in my understanding, agency is taking accountability before it's too late or before it's already been done. So I would love to see the city, give back land, but before giving back land, also giving money to really help the Black community start these new cultural centers or spaces that we see in Africville as well too. So I think that would be really great.
What I would love to see are more street festivals. Toronto has an amazing Afro festival. So it's essentially a big street festival with a ton of music from various African countries and Caribbean countries, as well as tons of food from all over Africa and all over the Caribbean and the West Indies. And everyone spills out into the streets. It doesn't matter what color you are, or how old you are, or who you're friends with, you all come out. There's drums, a ton of drumming, and everyone dances. You get pulled into the streets, whether or not you like it, and you celebrate, you dance, and you enjoy. I would love to see that experience here in Vancouver as well.
I think for me as a filmmaker, I'm sure a lot of people don't know, but most of Canadian television gets written in Toronto. And so there's a big ecosystem of film, television, media that's happening in Toronto, which is lovely. I would love to see more of that happen also in Vancouver, just so that we can see just different Canadian experiences represented across the whole country, and specifically more media and television and film are so important in shaping how we see ourselves and just how we see ourselves fitting into the rest of the world, and we need more of that because we need to see that reflected in our media in the same way that we need to see it reflected in history and in literacy and in education. So yeah, hoping for that would be great.
Exactly, having that show and display of the culture and the celebration within our community is really important. Hopefully it starts coming back and we actually have those experiences as a community.
And let it be joyful.
Yeah.
Because we need more joy on TV.
In your professional and personal lives, from childhood to now, what, if any, obstacles or challenges have you faced as it relates to your race in your community, school, and work environment?
Well, I have an immediate thought. Yeah, I guess for those of you who saw Union Street, like that was, to get that film made was a good, I would say 6-year journey to even get funded. And, going into, as a filmmaker, the process of getting a film greenlit is you are putting together a pitch deck, you're putting together basically marketing materials, and then you're sitting in boardrooms with executives who in Canada are most often white and most often men. And so coming in as a Canadian biracial woman, a young woman, and pitching is a very different experience. Almost everybody who I pitched told me that no one would want to watch a film like Union Street, that the history wasn't actually important, or that there wasn't enough fact to back up the history. And then, 2019, 2020 happens, where the world has their awakening about Black lives and the importance of not just, that Black lives matter, but that our cultures need to be celebrated and have a seat at the table. And then the conversation started to shift, but the conversation shift still wasn't enough that, I was still getting, okay, sure, we'll make this film, but no one's gonna watch it. No one's because of that, we're not gonna, having lots of conversations about budget because people, it's a film is a business like anything else, and so they're trying to anticipate what's going to happen based off of what they think the viewership will be like. And we proved them wrong. We sold out every single show. We had lineups down the street. The film has been, all spread across the entire world as far as showings in Ghana, Africa, which is amazing. Yeah, it's definitely something that's still ongoing, and I think especially with the social climate right now, there's a lot of pullback from just Black content in general, a lot of funding cuts happening through just what's happening politically right now, and so yeah, it's I think it got a little bit, I don't want to say easier, because it's definitely not easy. It's not an easy profession, and you gotta really love it and want to make change on a passion level to be okay with the career. But yeah, I think it's just a constant having to prove that the work that you do is not just important, but that people are going to watch it or that people are going to resonate with it.
My journey to the professional world as a lawyer, I've definitely had observations. Maybe not necessarily challenges or obstacles, but certainly observations. The thing that I've observed the most is when I went to law school, there were 2 Black students in my year, 2. In the school of 300 students, probably about how many are sitting in the auditorium now, we had 5 Black students. We all know each other, and we definitely have stayed in touch. So that's the first observation that I have. And I don't know if it's that Black people are feeling as though it's something that they can't achieve or can't do or whatnot, but I know for myself, I've never known any other Black lawyer. So when it came time to applying to law schools, I couldn't turn to anybody and say, well, should I go here, should I go there? Or I could look at anybody and say, oh, I want to be just like them, right? So I set the path on my own for the first time as a Black law student, and now have made connections with other Black law students and want to ensure there's continuity and that we do have more Black kids going to law school.
Yeah, Rashida, I think what you said is so important, because what it is saying is like representation is so critical. And when you don't have that representation, it really inhabits you as a person. You have to have a lot of strength and energy to really go out and make that change. So for me, reflecting on my experience, I would say growing up, the hardest thing was probably the stereotypes that people would put on me. And ultimately, it was not living up to people's stereotypes that hurt me the most as well too. For example, like in sports, if I wasn't, the strongest athlete out there on the court, or if I wasn't the fastest runner, it was really confusing for people because all they thought that Black people, were doing were athletes, and that's one stereotype. And it was really hard for me because I also didn't have a lot of representation of what other facets of Blackness could look like. A lot of what I was digesting on Blackness was from media. I didn't see other examples in my day-to-day. I also think one thing that I experienced as well too was this streamlining, and I felt like at times I almost streamlined myself as well too. So whether it wasn't taking that AP math course, or whether it wasn't going and getting a bachelor's of something that I actually think I would have been really interested in back then, and I think I would have been really great at, I kind of didn't let myself dream. And I think that's something that I'm really trying to unlearn right now at my age. So representation for me was one of the biggest challenges, and it's ultimately what led me to go back to Atlanta 4 years ago and meet my family and just really get to know all the different intersections of what it means to be Black. And the term intersectionality is really important in this conversation as well too, because this term was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw. She's an Indigenous and Black scholar and civil rights activist, and she designed this word to help understand the multifaceted experiences that Black women go through, because when we talk about a feminist movement, who's often at the center of that conversation? White women. When we talk about anti-Blackness and anti-Black racism, who's at the conversation of that? Predominantly Black men. And so for Black women, we have to understand that it's our race, our gender, our age, our sexuality, our genders, and that it's really hard to just pick a point what I'm experiencing. I can't just say I'm experiencing something because I'm Black. For me, it's a bunch of different boxes. And so sitting here today, that's still something that I'm very much in conversation with myself about. Am I not getting this job because I'm young? Or am I not because, I'm highly educated? Am I not getting this job because, it's really hard for me to really pinpoint exactly what's happening?
Thank you guys so much for those amazing responses. I have a little follow-up question. Have you guys ever felt like you had to filter, police, or monitor the things that you say? And how have you dealt with that, especially as a Black woman in this society?
We're all having a little chuckle to ourselves, I can see. Yeah, I think specifically I see it happen in myself with writing. I in addition to documentary, I also write scripted. And noticing just, I'll write something that feels authentic, like a conversation that feels authentic to me, and then I start thinking, oh, but this interaction between a daughter and a Kenyan immigrant father, they're probably not gonna understand that, so I probably should, remove some of the Swahili that we mix in with the English just to make it so more people understand and can relate. I start to kind of self-edit, and it's been a big practice in me just to not do that and not care. You want to connect with the audience, but at the end of the day, just really standing 10 toes down on what is authentic to you. And I think, yeah, I think like the more niche and authentic you get, actually the most relatable and the more that people start to actually relate with things. So I mean, it's a hard thing not to do because you have, with everything in the arts, there's a intervention of capitalism, of money. We all need to make money to survive in a society, and so it definitely is something that you kind of have that internal battle of like what is true to me, what is authentic to me, and what is going to help make me a sustainable living so that I can live. So it's definitely a big conversation.
Yeah, I very much can agree with that balance, and I think that also comes down to like creating boundaries as well too in your professional life, especially as an entrepreneur. Really just knowing like when your boundaries are being crossed, but also when you're getting closer to reaching some of your professional goals as well too. So just having that balance. One thing I will not sit here and say is that things are getting better for Black people. I think often when we're sitting here in Black History Month, we want like a positive, like optimistic finish, and I think I want to be very clear that the community is definitely, not necessarily like needing support, but that the conversation needs to keep happening, and that, the conversation really started rapidly in 2020, and it's like slowly becoming not as important of a conversation. So I just really want to amplify what's going on out there. And then specifically, as I do work a lot in city, Strathcona, Hogan's Alley, that area is very much still highlighted to urban renewal and gentrification. And so we just collectively just need to be really mindful about what's going on in our communities. And when we talk about urban renewal, just having a broad mindset about who is really being affected by these policies. And I'll give you a quick example. I don't know if you're familiar with the Georgia Viaducts, but that's ultimately what pushed the Hogan's Alley neighborhood into and had the Black community really dispersed. But there's a green plot of land right by Honeybee, which is a really great coffee shop. But the city was going to put a temporary fire hall station right there, and that's the only piece of green land in that neighborhood. And so temporary, 8 to 10 years. It's just really disturbing to see that these urban renewal policies are constantly repeating themselves over again. So I would just ask all of us collectively to just be aware of our surroundings and come together and really ultimately push back, which we did.
Yeah, and to your point about that, I mean, I've been living in Strathcona for a while, like East Van for 10 years, and obviously Union Street covers a lot of what urban renewal has historically done to the community in the past. And it's interesting because there was just recognition of a coin from the Canadian Mint of that neighborhood, and I feel like there's a lot of things that happen that I think coin is a lovely thing that's going to help hopefully encourage deeper learning for people, but it's also a collector's coin that is not accessible and is $300 versus a coin in circulation that would actually really cause more conversation about this very significant Canadian historical event. All this to say, I think, to your point, Shayla, just being very careful about thinking that things are over and that we're in this we're in this kind of almost like Black History Month is about history, but we're living in that right now. We're living, all of these things are repeating, and I would almost argue to say that things have gotten worse for the Black community since 2020. And the political, social climate right now is making things worse for the Black community right now.
Saying well put by the other panelists, have nothing further to add.
Thank you for that. And the next question is, where do you find your community and why is that important for you?
For an example, I said Caribbean Day, and it's a time where I actually feel at home in Vancouver. And for my culture, we celebrate it with its music, dancing, and more. Just like actually having that time for my community to come together and feel like I'm back at home. So, what does that look like for you?
And for example, I recently learned of the Black Student Hub at the UBC campus, and I love that Black students can connect and share their similar experiences in that community.
I think we often take it upon ourselves, being Black, to create our communities. We find each other. I was sharing with the panelists just before we came out here that we actually know we have a similar friend. And I saw them on the street pushing a stroller with their daughter, and I quickly approached them and said, we have to connect. And we created and became part of a Black moms group here in Vancouver. Similarly, when I was in law school, our few Black law students created a Black Law Students Association at our school. We would host an annual fundraiser, and the fundraiser was an arm wrestling competition. And it was open to all students. You had to pay your amount, and then we would play your theme music as you would come out and face off, win a trophy at the end. But at the end of the day, everyone recognized that is the Black community putting together this event. Likewise with today, I can't thank our moderators enough for creating the list and panelists and bringing us together today and creating, again, yet another community.
Yeah, just really echoing what you're saying there about, going out and creating our own. I often reflect on that question, like, what really is community? And then the next question I go to is, what does it feel like when you are in community? But I would say I find community spaces in the arts and entertainment sector in Vancouver. A lot of my friends are either practicing artists or DJs, and so I just go out and support them as much as I can, and I find community and likeness through folks through my friends. And then I would say another form of community is the education and the curiosity community. I lead walking tours through Hogan's Alley during the month of February every Saturday at 1 p.m. You all are welcome to come this Saturday at 1 p.m. we meet on Main and Union. And so for me, I just love to see people who are open and willing to learn. And so I love that sense of community, curiosity.
Yeah, I would say, as somebody who's lived here my whole life, I think I had always been searching for community, like specifically, being the daughter of a Kenyan refugee and having like my Kenyan heritage be so ingrained in my upbringing and identity. Growing up, there was actually not a big Kenyan community at all in the Lower Mainland, like all across the GVRD. Like we met like 2 other Kenyan families, and we're like, okay, this is great. Like we know 2 other people. So I think, for me, like even within the Black community, it's been tough to find a shared shared community experience within like the umbrella of being like an East African, because the continent is so vast and all of our cultures are just so different that one thing that could feel like something that's like your grandma's favorite recipe is not going to be the same if you're from the other part of the country, or somebody who's from Jamaica versus someone who's from Kenya or Uganda. Like everything changes just because our cultures are so vast. So it definitely was very, I think, even in finding Black community, I felt like it was very tough for me to really feel ingrained in the community. But this past summer, I actually had a really incredible experience. It was, I think like the first time I was like, oh, this is what it actually feels like. It was with Black Women Film, which is an incredible organization, and Collective Bunch, both of which really focus on Black folks in the film industry. And we all went on a retreat Kitsilano together, and we're eating at this very massive long table dinner, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is my family. Like, we're all sitting here, and it's like big long table dinner, and it just felt like home. So yeah, I think in finding, because it's not just it's not just blackness, it's not just being African Canadian, it's not just finding other Black women. It's also that the shared interest. Like sometimes I remember being a kid and being, oh, you're gonna like this person because they're also Black, and just disregarding the fact that maybe you have different interests to this person. And so I think in searching for community, I think it's also okay to want to search for people and spaces that really reflect your interests and where you are in life.
Thank you guys so much. Out of curiosity, how and if Black History Month was celebrated at your school as a child, how was it recognized, whether it was or wasn't?
I more so remember Multicultural Day at my schools, elementary and high school. And so Multicultural Day was a celebration of all cultures. And because our schools were so diverse, we would have booths with the Sri Lankan kids and the Indian kids and the Ghanaian kids and the Jamaicans, and almost everywhere in the world you would find a booth, and everyone would bring a special either meal or treat, and they would showcase their flags and a few facts about their various countries. And for me, that was an amazing way to celebrate sort of all cultures and also experience various cultures through that multicultural day.
Okay. I don't ever remember through elementary school, middle school, or high school ever celebrating Black History Month, and I don't actually remember learning anything about Canadian Black history ever. I know a lot of things have, hopefully things have obviously changed now because we're all here today, but I did not, I didn't have that experience at all. And I think it while it was definitely an isolating experience, especially being at predominantly white schools, my parents, I have to, kudos to them, they really made sure that I had access to other education outside of what I was learning in the curriculum, and so Black history was celebrated in my house for sure, and I got to learn a lot about my heritage, which I'm really grateful for, but I did not, there was nothing at all. I remember maybe a teacher mentioning Martin Luther King, and that was it.
I don't remember learning anything about Black history. My journey with my Blackness has been very interesting because I was raised by, my parents who are white, my sister, she's Vietnamese and Guatemalan, so we didn't really talk about Blackness. I actually remember, I think I was in the 6th grade, and my one guy friend at the time, I told him, I was like, I'm adopted, right? And he was like, what, you are? I'm like, okay, wow. So that was really interesting for me, and I really didn't start understanding what Blackness meant to me personally until later on in my life. I would say I learned, maybe some of you can agree early on, I think the education system is changing to a certain extent. I received a very Eurocentric history when I was growing up, and that's really fueled my work as an educator, public historian today. Starting a Black Student Union in the Abbotsford School District was amazing, and it really served as a opportunity for other districts to start these groups as well too, and so I was very honored to be invited into different schools and help create these spaces with other educators. And really the 3 things when I go around to different schools and talk to students and Black students in BC is they tell me 3 things. They say the only time they learn about Black history is during Black History Month, that often these conversations focus on slavery, and in particular slavery in the United States. And then the third thing is that they really question teachers' readiness to even host these various conversations. And I think with someone who engages with community, when community tells you these needs over and over and over again, you either have the option to keep going back and hearing the same thing and reflecting on it, or you have the opportunity to make a change and listen to what these people are really asking you to do. So leaving the classroom, creating resources with organizations, giving them to teachers, building capacity within students and leading walking tours was really just my response. And I think in a way, healing my inner child who really didn't question anything that I was digesting. I very much was, and the teachers may know this reference, but when you talk about Paulo Freire and the banking model, I was the epitome of the banking model. Teachers just putting information in me and not critically thinking about the materials that I was digesting. And so as an educator and just a person, I really want you all to think critically about what materials you're digesting, to think about who's around the tables that you're sitting at as you all are going into your professional years. If there's a voice that's missing, if there's people that are missing, really it's important to invite diversity in, because representation, diverse experiences really help add to businesses and just overall productive thinking in working models.
To your point too, I think that they're through the education system, and especially in academia and history and in media, there's a lot of misinformation, and there's a lot of, especially when we look at our history in schools, there's a lot of what I would call Canadian propaganda, especially around how the Black community was treated in Canada. I'm just about to deliver a film tomorrow, and we talk a lot about Salt Spring Island and how BC Black farmers really helped build the agricultural foundation of BC, and most people don't know that, and most people were actually told a completely different story. And so we talk a lot about food security, cultural food sovereignty, and how just through education and history, powers such as the government and institutions have been able to commit environmental racism and cultural erasure through these teachings. And the more and more they permeate through society, the more it's like things have just become common, what we've referred to as common knowledge. We talk about the Underground Railroad, and it's what most likely in a textbook it's going to tell you that previously enslaved Black Americans came to Canada to seek refuge, but the reality is they came to seek refuge and most often were treated much poorly, much more, there was a very big discrepancy between what they were told Canada was and what the actual experience was. And we actually see, we're told Canada never had slavery, but we see indentured servitude being a legal form of slavery in some cases. So I think, being very aware of just what we're being taught, and being very critical of what we're being taught, and seeking to expand our understanding of history, just because it really helps you understand the context in which we're living today.
Can I quickly touch on that point as well too? Also, just to talk about Black folks' experience when they did come to Canada. At one point, Victoria was considered a Black colony. It had about 800 Black folks living there. Majority of those people went back to the United States. And I think that's really telling to see what's actually was happening here in Canada. It's not this neutral space and place that we're told in schools. And also, the Black history isn't the only history that's being whited out here in Canada. I mean, we don't talk about the Japanese internment camps here, which also were impacting Japanese people who were living in Hogan's Alley with the Black community. We don't talk about the racism that, we are talking about residential schools, but that's only been very recently that we've started having these conversations. The Chinese head tax, the Irish folks and the Italian people who were coming over, who were also considered racialized at one point. And when you understand race and racial categories, you'll understand that a little bit more. But it's just important for us to just really have that like open mindset, and yeah, like we were saying, like just be critical and think about what stories are keep being hidden and erased intentionally.
Yeah, like even if you look at the archives, like a lot, as a documentarian, like a lot of my work is looking at archives, and it's interesting to see what is available to the public and then what is hidden in locked filing cabinets, and what is purposely not put online and or marked incorrectly or not filed properly, and what things that have been redacted and just documents that have been destroyed. Like I think, yeah, Canada has definitely, there's been a very good marketing plan for Canada and how we're perceived, but there's definitely a lot more laying beneath the surface.
Those are really powerful points, and it shows that it's important to be aware of what we're learning, and especially in Canada, because if we're living here in the future, then we have to know our history. So we're going to switch gears here a little bit. Could you tell us who's been a source of inspiration in your life, and who in your mind has demonstrated excellence? This could be personal life or public person.
Mine's very broad, but really anyone who's creating things is an inspiration for me. I draw a lot of my inspiration from girls that I see on TikTok and Instagram who are just going out and living their lives and not thinking about, well, of course they're being mindful, but living their lives and not falling into a box, and just really like going out there and changing the narrative. So all the creatives out there really inspire me. And then I work a lot with youth, specifically youth who are in the field of STEAM. And so seeing them create is also really inspiring as well too. So drawing my inspiration from you all, and then people who I'm seeing on the internet.
My parents are a definite source of inspiration. We, as a family, moved here from Ghana, and they could not speak English at all. As a child who was 6 years old, I acted as the family interpreter, so kids' English to my language so that I could communicate with my parents and family. But my parents, absolutely, huge source of inspiration. My dad drove a taxi cab in Toronto, and my mom was a hairdresser in Toronto. And somehow they've raised 4 well-educated kids who are all healthy and happy. So huge source of inspiration. My immediate family, so my husband, my kids, and I, we are huge into sports. We love all sorts of sports. My son's favorite athlete is LeBron James. And a quote from LeBron James is, "Don't be afraid to fail, it's the key to success." My daughter's favorite athlete, or her inspiration, is Simone Biles, even though US is a rivalry to Canada. Simone Biles is still her favorite. She just thinks she's a beautiful, amazing athlete, and I agree. Simone Biles' quote is, "At the end of the day, if I've had fun, I know it was a good day."
I love that. That's such a good quote. I think for me, like one of my biggest inspirations is Shonda Rhimes. If you don't know her, she is the brains and the powerhouse behind shows like Grey's Anatomy, Bridgerton, and I think, I as a kid, I actually really knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a writer. I knew I wanted to do something creative, and I looked at just, what that meant in Canada, and I didn't really have someone who I could point the finger and be like, yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. And then I found out that Shonda Rhimes was a Black woman, and I was like, what? This is crazy. And then I really kind of attached myself to her and have followed her work ever since I was a kid. And then I think something that was, really, really kind of reinstated my love for Shonda is I found out that Grey's Anatomy was actually supposed to be about a young Black woman. And that show was actually supposed to center a young Black woman, going to med school, and then ending up at a hospital. And the network said, no, we don't do that. That's not happening. And then we get Grey's Anatomy with Meredith Grey. But I think just seeing the evolution of her career and seeing that she could go from, playing the game and still making a show like Grey's Anatomy happen, which is, I believe, still one of the longest running TV shows in North America, to, then just continuously making other TV shows, being a showrunner, which is basically like the big boss on a TV show, and then, eventually now making a franchise like Bridgerton, which is all about celebrating different cultures and communities, and in a period piece which is usually very Eurocentric. So I think that is a huge source of inspiration to me, and just thinking, even if somebody tells you that you can't do something, or someone says no to your idea, put it in your back pocket, because you can 100% do it in the future. You gotta think the long game, and just know what your path is and be okay with following it.
Okay, that's great. And what have you, if something, have you learned to love about yourself over time? Something for me has been my hair. I've learned to love it, and the amazing things I can do with it, even though when I was younger I didn't appreciate it as much.
Off the top of my head, I feel like I would just say, like, living in this community, honestly, like learning to actually just love myself and not having to change myself for anyone, or having to just like be what everybody wants me to be and actually know who I am. I think that's pretty much.
Mine is learning to love the choices that I make. My choices are my own. I make them in the moment, knowing what I know, and leaving regrets behind.
I think mine would have to be intuition. I think, I have a very strong intuition about people and places and things that I should do, and I've always had that as a kid. And I think sometimes we're taught that you need to follow fact, and you need to follow things that are in your environment. But I also think following intuition and following what feels right to you as a person is so powerful. And yeah, being okay with it. If it doesn't make sense to other people, that's okay. You can do it just because it makes sense to you, and just because it feels good to you, and yeah, that's, I don't know. Intuition can bring you to really beautiful and brilliant places.
I love what everyone said, and it's just like really nice to hear that out loud as a reminder as well too. I would say that what I've learned to love about myself is my hair as well too, and I think that's just come with age. It also has come with being in a different financial situation than I was when I was younger, because now I do have the ability to get different styles, and I have the time to explore a little bit more with my hair. And I also think like TikTok has really helped me learn my hair more as well too. So I would say that just with like social media and seeing how other people take care of their hair, it's been really helpful. But I do want to echo what everyone else has said about, your journey being your journey, and just, following that. And if it doesn't make sense to someone, then that's okay. And I think that just comes with time and confidence, and just surrounding yourself with like people who I'm up here with right now, to just hear those reminders and to just know like, okay, that's right, I'm true.
Thank you. As we look towards the final week of Black History Month, do you have any advice for our school community, and what words do you want to leave with us? And I also just want to say, I can't put into words how thankful I am, and sure we all are, for your raw, insightful words of knowledge that you've bestowed upon us. Thank you guys so much.
I just want to say that being Black is not a monolith. Being Black is very dynamic. even just sitting up here, we all have such different experiences about our Blackness, and so I just want you to remain curious when you meet Black folks and don't have, just like you would with everybody, right? Like you just want to meet the person for who they are, so continue humanizing everybody and just getting to know people for who they are. Another thing that I was wanting to echo that I already spent some time talking about is just about staying curious and having an open mind and being that person who's in the room who's advocating for diverse voices and diverse perspectives to come into certain conversations.
I echo and say that inclusivity is so important, especially in this time. So do your best as much as possible to learn about others genuinely and make new friendships. Welcome as many people as you can into your own lives and try to be inclusive.
I love that. Yeah, no, I think sometimes when we look at diversity, we see it as like a pie. Like there's only so much space, and people get a little bit touchy and afraid of like, okay, well, we make room for this person. We're not gonna, it's gonna take away from my space or take away from my position or what I have to say. But thankfully, community is not like pie, and we can actually, we have the ingredients. We can create an abundance of pies, and there's, really an abundance of opportunity. And I think, just really sitting in that abundance mentality that more is good, more diverse voices is a good thing. It's good business. It's good for the economy. It's good for our mental health. It's just like the good is just as abundant and endless as we all are. And yeah, just really being okay with that. But I think, also I would say, Black history is Canadian history. And I think it's beautiful that we have Black History Month, and I never want it to go away. But I think also just having some agency to bring the curiosity, as Shayla mentioned, to bring the diversity, as Rashida mentioned, into spaces 365 days of the year. Like we need that, and we need to have that feeling all the time, because that's what makes a strong community, and that's what makes strong people.
Thank you for those. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our school community today?
I'd like to thank everyone for making the time to be here, especially our moderators for putting this all together. I think it's so important that everyone has had this opportunity to hear. Even with the panelists here, we're all so different. We come from different backgrounds, we've had different experiences, but we're more than happy to share. And I think more importantly, that everyone took the time to be here and to listen. So thank you.
The last thing I would say is just find your why and just go for it. Follow your dreams and don't let anybody tell you that you can't do it. I hope if you saw anything from us here today is that we are following our dreams, and we're not really letting people tell us no. And like Jamila was saying, if not now, put it in your pocket for later. But truly, guys, just like go out and just shoot for the stars, and you're gonna get there. And I think that's really exciting. And the future is you all. So make good choices and be good people.
We feel afraid to ask for help and ask questions and to just say what we need and what we want to do. Don't be afraid of that, even if it's a celebrity or a star or someone you fear approaching. Like, you should make that connection and take those steps in agency for yourself.
Okay, so I'd like to direct a huge thank you to you guys. We are so grateful for you being here and sharing your stories with us today. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy lives to educate our school community on the history, importance, and excellence of Black history, specifically in Vancouver. So students, please join me in thanking our panelists and stay seated until your teachers. Just look to your teachers for direction.